Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this atypical live event night. It is not Wednesday. It is a Friday, 7 p.m. Welcome to Dan Wilson for Kootenai County Sheriff Live, where we talk about all things Kootenai County, nationwide, you name it, worldwide. But more specifically, we're answering questions for those of you who are Kootenai County, the greatest county in the entire country. Thanks for joining us also from Southern Idaho and the Boise, Great Falls, Boise, Idaho Falls area, as well as Eastern Washington, Western Montana, way up north in Idaho. If you love liberty without compromise, you're going to enjoy what we have to say tonight. Now, my excellent producer, the person that makes me visually and audibly sound good,
Yeah.
is my wife, Donna.
Now, I'm struggling to sound good tonight because I'm on the end of getting my voice back after having been not feeling well this week.
Happens when kids go to camp.
Yeah.
They bring home the crap.
Yeah, they bring home the crud. We are international.
We are.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah.
You say hello to people regionally, but it's pretty cool to remember that with not too much of a setup, you're international.
And we do have a kind of a new setup tonight.
Yeah, we're working on converting my office into a studio. So tonight it's a little bit of a makeshift setup, and we're just going to improve as we go.
What are we going to talk about tonight? Well, as a topic for you guys to be interested in, specifically Kootenai County issues, how much does that cup of coffee cost with Sheriff Bob Norris? We're also going to talk about a landmark Supreme Court ruling today in favor of the J6 defendants. We're going to talk about also Bob and his billionaire buddies and the crooked things that they're involved with. You guys should be paying attention. We have lots to talk about, but of course, at the forefront, I want to hear your questions because I want to be able to answer any concerns, questions you might have about me, comments. I am going to be your next sheriff, and it's important that you all get to know just exactly who I am. That's dead air.
What is?
Well, I had nothing to say. I was waiting for you to come in.
This is Flim Flam.
Flim Flam.
That was the one thing I wanted to get in here tonight. Flim Flam.
For Mike Bauer. Flim Flam.
Keep it going, Dan Wilson.
So I have often criticized the entire county, and more specifically the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, for always asking for more taxes, as if they don't have enough already. Now, there has never been an official top to bottom audit or forensic audit of the Sheriff's Office. And when I get into office, the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to request out of the county commissioners funds to audit the Sheriff's Office, a forensic audit, top to bottom, because we really need to know where the dollars are going and how things are being spent, whether there's waste, what we can do without, what we absolutely need. But I want to draw your attention to something that you may or may not be aware of. If you're in Kootenai County and you follow anything relating to the current sheriff, you know that he is a huge fan of coffees with your sheriff. In fact, they're going on constantly, aren't they?
They are. Yeah.
So I was curious and put in a public records request, which I think that we can pull that up here, that request that I put into the sheriff's office. And I specifically requested every event, coffee with your sheriff or equivalent, that Bob Norris has done since 2023. So that would be all of calendar year 2023 and calendar year 24 up to May. And a couple weeks later, I was given in the mail a stack of papers that was pretty thick. And I sorted all of these out, and I want to show a visual. Now, these happen to be, I don't know if you guys can see these.
Oh, you
can show a typical one. Well, don't show that one yet because I don't want to give it away.
Well, I'm showing you.
Oh, you're showing me now.
Yeah.
So this is your typical announcement: breakfast with your sheriff or coffee with your sheriff. Sheriff Robert B. Norris welcomes members of whatever community to attend the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office breakfast with your sheriff. It could be a coffee with your sheriff, where the members of his administration and the sheriff himself are going to be there to answer any questions that the community might have and to get your invaluable feedback. And invaluable is a pretty cool word. Now, this happens to be just the stack that I received for 2023. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to flip through these, but there are 8. There's 8 of these events in all of the calendar year 2023.
Now, when you did your records request, they returned printouts of their flyers. Is that what this is?
They did. They were not able, for whatever reason, to give me an electronic copy. So I had to go to the good old post office box to pick these copies up. So we have in 2023 a total of 28 breakfast coffees with your sheriff. Now, I've been arguing for a long time that these events are actually campaign events that Bob Norris is pulling off, disguised as town halls. So there are a total of 8 in 2023. And just this year alone, through May, there's a total of 12.
Okay.
So we're already halfway through the year, not quite halfway through the year, and we're over at 66% of last year's. Now, again, people are asking, why is this a big deal? Well, what you have to understand is that when Bob Norris is out in these communities for these events, it's not just the sheriff, the representative of the people, you know, the guy that you elect to be your sheriff. It's not just him coming out into the community with maybe one staffer answering questions and having the conversations. He's bringing an entire entourage. He's bringing approximately 12 deputies and support staff with him to every one of these events. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Why is the sheriff not able to communicate to his constituents and answer their questions? And if there happens to be a technical question, well, he can get back to his constituent with whatever that technical question might be. Or maybe he brings an undersheriff. But no, Bob Norris at every one of these events, when he's bringing this entourage, he's bringing jail captains, he's bringing detectives, he's bringing the undersheriff, he's bringing a whole host of his lieutenants and captains and sergeants to come and stand around him for a couple hours while he's having a conversation with you guys. Now, again, why is that a big deal? Well, I'm a businessman, and when I look at manpower, I always think cost. And when you are bringing 12 deputies to each one of these events, they're spending an average of 2 hours if you average out the travel time and the wear and tear on the county vehicles. Well, that adds up. So just for example, in 2023 for 8 events, there was a total of 192 man hours that were spent at these coffee events that Norris is using for campaigning. 192. If you average approximately $100 per hour cost, you think of the salary and all the benefit packages and the vehicle costs wrapped into an hourly rate of $100, that's kind of average. That's about $19,000 that it costs the taxpayers in 2023 just for Bob to come to your local community and have a conversation because he's not smart enough or capable of holding these events by himself. Now, this year, through May, there were 12 such events. And if you add that math up, you're about 288 man hours, or about $28,000 in cost. Now, you could argue and say the dollars go up or down. The reason why I'm having to average this is when we pulled that records request up, I had asked my records request to find out the quantity per event of deputies that showed up and what their rank and or position is. And what was returned to me, was they have no record. No records exist, which is curious because it wasn't that long ago that I happened to be a cop. And I know that in law enforcement, whenever we're working, dispatch needs to know where we are. And so we always checked out with dispatch, and every event, whether it was an actual call for service to your house, you have a burglary or a theft or an assault, no different than a community event. There's an event, an incident that is created typically in CAD for dispatch to know where all the deputies. And you would think that if you have 10 to 12 deputies, including the sheriff, that's an event that would need to be captured.
Well, isn't it when you're on patrol, if you're even stopping for lunch or a short break, you're logging that or letting dispatch know, I would think.
We always need to have a disposition, a place where dispatch knows to contact us, especially if for whatever reason they can't get us on the radio. So unfortunately, there's one of two possibilities. Either Kootenai County Sheriff's Office's policies are so lax and undisciplined that they don't keep track for accountability reasons to the people what they're doing, when they're doing it, and for how long. Or, like we've kind of been facing all along, they're refusing to give the numbers because they know the numbers look bad. So when the sheriff's office is not transparent, Bob ran on a campaign, a platform of complete transparency, then it's up to people like me to look at what they're doing to bring it to the public's attention and say, hey, this is costing us a lot of money. And there can be no doubt that these coffees with your sheriff events, because they're usually done about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning when the rest of us are working. So it's usually retirees and people that don't have the typical 9-to-5 jobs. That's costing you guys a lot of money. And the sheriff's constantly complaining that he doesn't have enough money for patrol and enough people to go around. I think there are 18 down on deputies currently. So yeah, I would be curious what you guys have to say about the sheriff using the taxpayers' resources to help bolster his campaign stats.
We have a comment from Sandy on Instagram saying forensic audit should be required on all levels of public office.
Yes.
Now, another question I had is if there's anyone that has a question about what the sheriff's office is doing with resources or how they spend their time, do you have to be somebody special to request that information?
Not at all. You just have to go to the government website. This is standard throughout the entire country. This is federal law and state law that requires transparency in government. Now, there's certain things that government does not have to disclose if it's sensitive, and that's clearly articulated by law, by jurisdiction, by state. But yeah, you can go to KCGOV, so KC, Kootenai County Gov.us. You can go down to How Do I, that page, How Do I, and look for request records, and it'll walk you through it. And I would encourage all of you to participate in this because government is always at the consent of the people. You guys are the boss. You guys are the ones that need to be the watchdog over what's happening. Now, I'm going to tell you that my belief is that there truly is a record. My personal belief is that Bob Norris doesn't want the public to know what I want to bring to your attention, and that's an extreme waste of taxpayer dollars. You do not need 12 of your support staff, Bob Norris, to converse with the people. It's a bolstering of who he is in the community to show everybody that he's the sheriff and he can use county resources, kind of like what he did when he got after Mark Eberline, who's going to be our next county commissioner. And he excoriated Mark Eberline when Mark was running in the primary for daring to use the Kootenai County Sheriff's badge, the star, in one of his posts. Oh yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But Eberline put the star on one of his posts, and Norris, in his official capacity, wrote about a page and a half letter excoriating Eberline for daring to use the badge without authorization, and it's not to be used politically. We'll pull that up one of these days and actually post that to the website.
That's a good one.
Right after that, he got caught allowing his fraternal order of police. That's the Deputy Sheriff's Association that a portion of the Kootenai County Sheriff's deputies belong to. It's a deputy gang, and we're going to deal with that later. But the whole thing is that FOP has a political action committee, and they took between $8,000 to $10,000 and used a publication, a mailer that went out to everyone to support candidates that the FOP wanted to be elected to office, who they were promoting, which included Bob Norris, their boss. And, Bob Norris actually let them use and admitted to letting them use the Kootenai County Sheriff's Star for their promotion. And when you look at that mailer that came out, of course, we're in a new studio, so I don't have that mailer to show. If you're not paying attention, you would think that that is the recommendation of the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office. So, Bob, we're on to you. We're going to start calling out all of your wicked ways, and the people are not going to be duped anymore to the waste and the nepotism that is rampant throughout your office.
Question from Facebook. Kim asks, are you going to utilize the alert system to communicate incidents in the community?
Am I going to use the alert? So we're talking about the Kootenai alert text message system, which was used.
Yeah. Interesting question.
Yeah. Okay. I won't get into the politics of that. If it's a resource that is vital to the safety and security of Kootenai County residents, then we absolutely will be using it for official emergency related or critical information messaging to the public. So yeah, we'll continue to use that platform. Bob Norris, we have been talking about the donors that both Bob and Bruce share. Now, Bruce is Special Deputy and County Commissioner Bruce Matari. Remember, folks, he is the only one of 3 commissioners that has this special deputization that Bob Norris gave to him shortly after Bob Norris was sworn in as the 13th sheriff of Kootenai County. Bruce, of course, was the original campaign manager for Bob Norris. And then shortly after Bob was sworn in, he gave Bruce the special deputization. And then Bruce became a county commissioner. So Bruce does have access to privileged information, despite whatever Bob and Bruce claim otherwise. Bruce had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and Bob has said that he uses Bruce for public relations. So you have a current county commissioner that is a politician that has access to all this privileged information that you and I, as citizens, don't. That's typical law enforcement privileged information that is used in the course of investigation. But Bob is a powerhouse when it comes to raising money. I've got to take my hat off to him. He's raised a big war chest for somebody that isn't worried about Dan Wilson running against him. We've pointed out that the Idaho Sunshine reports, SOS, Secretary of State, showing the donors that have given to Bob Norris, about 10 to 12% currently of his donors reside outside of the county and actually outside of the state of Idaho, primarily California, the Los Angeles, Southern California area, and Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, Bob has received maximum contributions from a billionaire who's also a big Trump supporter by the name of Don Ahern. Don Ahern gave not only maximum contributions in the primary, but one of his CFOs or CEOs of one of his other companies, a cubicle company out of Las Vegas, also gave maximum contribution. And his Ahern Rentals also, it is Extreme Manufacturing. So Don Ahern, businessman, billionaire out of Las Vegas, he owns a large share, the 51% or more of shares of Snorkel, which build those telescoping man lifts that you see on construction sites.
Oh, Snorkel lift.
Yeah. And he owned Ahern Rentals, which was purchased by United Rentals. He's a billionaire. He also builds these modular cubicle buildings that he can put on your job site. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Bob and Bruce were down in Las Vegas, hobnobbing at the Ahern Hotel at a Trump event that Don Ahern was hosting on behalf of Trump. And this is, again, a large donor from his many corporations and personal assets to Bob Norris. And you have to ask yourself, why is a billionaire from Las Vegas so committed to Bob Norris? Well, an interesting article came out just the other day, And I think you might find this article as amusing as I did. But what it entails is it shows Don Ahern is involved in some less than legit business practices. So Ahern has a lawsuit against him. He was running a Ponzi scheme. So in essence, he was making these so-called solar generators, and he sold these generators and invested in them. Had investors such as Geico, Sherwin-Williams, banks, a whole bunch of big corporations buy in on this, and it was supposed to net them, I think, $2 billion. Well, when it was all said and done, Don never delivered, never had anywhere near the amount of these generators that he claimed, and he was sued. And in California, judgment was lobbed against him for, I think, over $700 million. Well, while this proceeding was taking place in court, Ahern transferred money from Ahern Rental Incorporated and started siphoning it to other trusts and other business and other people, so that he liquidated all of his assets, and then said upon the judgment against him, where he had to pay all this money back, sorry, I don't have the money. So we have this article here from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, June 27th. So this just took place yesterday. You guys should look at it. This is who Bob Norris is hobnobbing with, who's supporting him. And by the way, just because somebody's a big Trump supporter and, financially and socially, does not mean that they are legitly good people or moral people. Don Ahern also owns the Ahern Hotel, where Bob and Bruce were hobnobbing with all of the big GOP Republican donors. And I think it's important that the people in Kootenai County truly are aware of where money is coming from and what kind of support Bob's getting. Some of you have already heard this. Some of you, this is brand new. Now, another interesting tie-in that both gave to Bruce Matari in his 2022 run for county commissioner and Bob Norris in the primary is Jason and Shayna Badati from Arizona. They're real estate developers, and more specifically, they're in the cannabis business. And you have to ask yourself, why two candidates that run on a platform of, responsible, smart growth? Well, why are they getting so much money from real estate developers? And more specifically, why is this individual and his wife so invested in Bob and Bruce? Now, if you go to some of the many articles online with this Jason Vadati, there's, as far as I can tell, his business is legitimate. He's not doing anything illegal, but he's always looking for new markets for the marijuana industry. So what do Bob and Bruce have in mind? They're taking money from individuals that their business is the pot industry, and they're giving maximum donations out of state. Do you think that medical marijuana may be on the horizon here? And maybe these guys are looking to get in on their piece of the pie? I don't know. I think it's important that we, all of us, continually look at what politicians are being funded by who. And it's very easy with the transparency laws, the sunshine laws, especially in Idaho. You can find out how much money is coming from out of state, how much money is coming from PACs. Now, remember, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the FOP, also receives money and can campaign on behalf of Bob Norris, but they can't collaborate. So it's illegal for a campaign or a campaign team to collaborate with a PAC in order to spend the PAC's money, which they can spend as much money as they want. They can take as much donations in, and they can spend as much money as they will on their candidate. Now, we know from the nepotism that's going on right now inside the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office that the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the executive board, many of them hold positions of leadership and command staff level in the sheriff's office. And we've heard from many deputies on the inside that what's going on right now is, if you align yourself with this fraternal order of place, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, then you're on the ends and you do what Bob wants, you're clear to go. You're part of the tribe. But if you're not, if you don't subscribe to that and you're working based on merit and based on integrity, well, the sheriff doesn't have a lot of patience or time for those deputies, including patrol and jail and some of his command staff. So, look, the Deputy Sheriff's Association is a problem, and it's a small percentage of the overall deputies that are members, but really the Deputy Sheriff's Association has become a gang. And we've seen this over and over again with the collusion that they really are in cahoots with Bob and Bruce Matari. So, what do we have any more questions coming in yet?
Not just yet.
So you got to hear me talk.
Mm-hmm.
So on the topic of transparency, I requested a copy of the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office deputy policy. So these policies should be how the entire operation runs. Everything from command staff to equipment to every special unit. There has to be policies in place. And that's not only good practice, but it's required so that the people that work at the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office know what they should be doing. Well, what I received was a policy manual that was not very exhaustive. In fact, it was the smallest policy manual I've ever seen. I came from 2 agencies in Washington State. They use Lexipol. It's kind of a nationally recognized, aggregated, but fitted by state and jurisdiction policy that were 350 to 400 pages. And as I was going through this, I was specifically looking for what the helicopter policy is, because remember, now we have a air support unit and we have TAC officers, deputies that are a part of this air unit. And I didn't see anything in there. So I contacted records again and I said, hey, I didn't notice any other volumes. My copy you gave to me says that it's volume 1, I believe it was 2021. But I didn't see anything for special units, nothing for K9, nothing for Marine Patrol, nothing for the helicopter. And I got a response saying there is nothing. So this once again leads me to believe either it's being obscured from my vision, being able to see what's going on, or they truly don't have a policy. And you know that I am not in favor of this helicopter program for a host of reasons, one of which is liability. Now, I'm very concerned because when you go to civil lawsuits, anytime a civil lawsuit emerges, those that are bringing the lawsuit, in this case, it would be against the county. Let's say that there's a malfunction with the helicopter and it crashes, because helicopters actually crash quite a bit. Well, what kind of exposure does Kootenai County have? What kind of dollars will it cost Kootenai County taxpayers in the event that a helicopter goes down and we come to find out that, we actually don't have policies and procedures, which is kind of odd because the helicopter is donated allegedly at no cost to the county, unless you include the $100,000 worth of equipment that they were able to get from the Board of County Commissioners, from civil asset forfeiture money, and to use to equip the helicopter that they don't own with FLIR, forward-looking infrared, with a spotlight, with radios, helmets. But they don't own the helicopter, and the helicopter itself and the pilots are exempt from public records requests, so you can't FOIA them. But you can FOIA any Kootenai County deputy information and about the incident that they happened to be on at the time that they were in the helicopter. It's not transparent government, folks. And if we don't have a policy for the helicopter, and we don't have one for K9, and we don't have one for the Marine unit, well, that is lack of leadership. It's lack of being risk adverse. And I'm really questioning as to what the real story is. Do we truly not have policies? I find that hard to believe. And if we don't, why not?
Yeah, I was going to say an excuse for the helicopter program might be that it's in a soft launch kind of period, a test run, a pilot program. And so maybe they're making it up as they go along, and they'll develop a policy
That's
manual.
poor policy. That should never happen.
But
you should never roll anything out that puts the public at risk, including the agency that's providing the services, without standard operating procedures.
they're not in a position to figure it out as they go along.
Well, it looks that way. So Bob Norris or any of the command staff at Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, if you know of policies that exist and why the records clerk, the record specialist came back and said there are no policies, please let me know. I would love to come back on at a future live event and set the record straight. But until such time, we're going to operate under the assumption that you guys don't know what you're doing and that you're putting the county at great risk. I'm curious what ICRIMP has to think about that.
The other thing is, when you requested policies, you found out that there were other programs that you already mentioned that also don't appear to have policies. So you can't use the excuse of, well, this is our newest program and that hasn't yet been developed.
There was no canine program.
Policy.
There was no policy. Yeah, there's no, when I'm talking about the programs, I'm specifically talking about those policies. There was no canine program policy. There was no Marine Patrol policy. I did not see anything about reserve officers. Now, I've heard that at one time they had reserve deputies, but I don't see a policy. So there obviously does not appear to be one for that. There also does not appear to be anything for chaplains. And I've heard that we have chaplains. So my question is, if you don't have policies for your members, even volunteers, to be able to follow, then what in the world are you doing to hold them accountable or giving them the guidance that they need to operate in these capacities? So I don't know. Maybe it's a disconnect with Kootenai County Sheriff's Office record division. Maybe it's Bob again obstructing. We don't know, but we are going to find out eventually. The truth always sifts to the top. And that's what we really want, is we want the truth so that we can run an effective, safe service for the taxpayers. Remember, we the people consent to being governed. And that includes the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office is the most important law enforcement agency inside your county. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, elected by the people. And he alone is the one that stands between tyranny and the people, that protects the citizens' constitutional rights, life, liberty, and property. And it's important that your sheriff truly understands what's at stake and is continually working hard to protect the citizens, including the taxpayers. I think there needs to be a lot of transparency. I'm sick and tired of being told that every solution to our problems is another tax increase. Now, I've been in business for 25 years, and I've held contracts and currently contracts with the Department of Defense, with big medical corporations, state governments, local municipalities. And I can tell you that as a businessman, we're continually having to refine our process and make certain that our books are squared away and that our risk is low, that we're providing a great service, so that we can continue to be in business. We would be out of business very quickly if we don't make good decisions. And unfortunately, in government, there's always another taxpayer to help with whatever mismanagement of funds the public has given you. It has been provided. Now, we see this quite a bit in schools. How many times are we told you have to give more money, more property taxes for the schools? And yet the schools are continually degrading in the types of students and their comprehension and their abilities. And yet the schools are being rewarded for their lack of professionalism, their lack of being able to turn out a good product, i.e., smart, educated kids. And we're always told that if you don't give, then you're anti-child. But in the real world, those of us that don't have tax dollars, we fix things very quickly. Otherwise, we're out of business. That's why we need businessmen and women like myself right now at this time in history to be occupying these elected offices, to bring a perspective and balance back to the local communities, to help manage our funds and governance the way the real world works. So I think that's very important.
Few questions coming in on Instagram. Bear with me here as my voice is teetering on the edge. Anything new regarding Bob Norris mystery disability retirement from the LASD? Anything new on that?
We have not officially received any change in information. What I can tell you is that we have a firsthand account who says that Bob Norris in the early 2000s had a heart attack. Now, this is what I'm being told. Whether it is true or not, we will eventually be able to disclose. But Bob had allegedly 2 stents put into his chest. So I don't buy until he can actually provide to all of us here locally in Kootenai County what his disposition is and quit hiding behind HIPAA. You want to be the sheriff, you need to disclose what your medical history is and what the conditions, Bob, of your medical retirement is, your disability retirement from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Now, $182,000 a year for a guy that's barely 60 is a lot of moolah, not counting your $150,000 you're making as being the current sheriff. But we need to know whether you are emotionally and physically fit to sit in the office of the sheriff with all that stress. I know I've seen you crying continually whenever you make mundane announcements. You seem to be emotionally unstable. So we really would love for you once and for all to provide us the documentation spelling out specifically what you retired medically from and your disability from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. How about you guys? You guys want to know that too?
And chime in if you like the answer to that. Chime in the comment section. Another question from Instagram: when you become the sheriff, how do you plan to weed out the command staff that have been part of the gang that you speak of from the KCSO? How can we trust this won't happen again?
Well, I think that what I want everybody in Kootenai County to be rest assured, is that I have a transition team already formed. And these are law enforcement professionals that know a lot about Kootenai County, that have quite a history here, and that understand where the problems lie. And they're going to help us immediately root out what problems there are and help us assign new competent individuals to be able to take over positions. Now, if somebody happens to be in a current position, captain, for example, and they've been doing a good job, they most likely are going to keep that position. However, if we find out that there's been any kind of dereliction of duty or nepotism or any other things that the rest of us in the county would consider to be below board, well, most likely that individual is going to be replaced and or reassigned. Now, for my administration, how am I going to ensure that the same problem is not going to happen? Well, number one, I'm not going to align myself with a deputy sheriff association. I mean, those associations are likened to a union. They're there for a specific reason, which is to encourage better benefit packages and working conditions to bargain for the deputies that are there. But me as sheriff, I'm going to treat the sheriff's office and all the staff with extreme ownership, which I believe that people that are there because it's a calling, not just because it's a job, those deputies and non-sworn support staff are going to love working in an environment where we foster extreme ownership. We give people the tools and enable them to become leaders in whatever capacity that they want. We give them the boundaries. We don't micromanage them. We give them what they need and tell them, go take care of the mission. And what is the overall mission? Securing the county, securing the people of Kootenai County's rights to life, liberty, and property. And I'm also bringing in a individual with more than 30 years of law enforcement experience, recently separated, who is an expert on ethics inside law enforcement, promotes the concept of the thin blue line and the warrior, which when used appropriately is a very good thing. We need warriors in our community to protect those that could otherwise be assaulted or abused by others that would like to deprive our people of life, liberty, or property. But there's going to be a mentorship that happens where we remind deputies that you are here because it's a calling, no different than if you're a pastor or a teacher or a nurse. You're not here just to make Wall Street money, but you're here because you have a calling, a commission to serve others. We're going to make certain that our deputies are taken care of morally. We have to take care of those that work for us and make certain that they're receiving a livable wage and good working conditions. The same that I do in my business right now. My employees are my greatest asset, and without them, I don't have a product to sell. I can't take care of my customers, and the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office customers are the citizens of Kootenai County. So we are going to work vigilantly with individuals that are going to help us monitor the overall culture, and we are not going to tolerate policy violations or ethical violations. It's not about what you preach, it's what you tolerate, and we're not going to tolerate any of these substandard actions.
Look, another question from Facebook this time. How are you going to handle arrest warrants? I get that they need to be done, but does it really have to be a SWAT and what seems like the whole force at one residence?
Well, I mean, I'm going to talk in hypotheticals right now. We live in a pretty violent world, and depending on the type of warrant that we're serving, it may well justify having a SWAT response. And that is not only for the safety of the individual that we are bringing the warrant to, but it could also be the officers serving the warrant, and it could be the community. So I'm never going to rule out and say that we're not going to use SWAT, because when SWAT is deployed correctly, it's meant to mitigate risk that normally could end up in much more acts of violence. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think that supervisors, when they're getting ready to serve warrants, need to do their risk assessments and review what is the history, what is the previous history of the individual that we're serving, what is the totality of the crime. So I hear what you're saying, and yes, we will be reviewing and making certain that our actions are not overbearing, not militaristic, like the FBI, who loves to send SWAT teams, to fathers who happen to be preying on an abortion clinic sidewalk too close, or those that dare to speak out against their local school board. Those are the more of the SWAT raids that I'm getting really sick and tired of. Now, we've also seen some egregious actions by law enforcement where they have missed the wrong house or served a warrant incorrectly and end up shooting and or killing, seriously injuring or killing an occupant because they didn't know what was going on. Their house was broken in and they returned fire. So we're going to be watching to make certain that our procedures and our training, that we equip our deputies so that everybody is safely accounted for on both sides of the aisle when it comes to any kind of, I won't say SWAT action, but warrant calls.
What are the annual operating costs for the helicopter program, and where does all the funding come from? Should it maybe be scrapped altogether?
Well, number one, as I have said for many months, when I am sworn in as the 14th sheriff of Kootenai County, that helicopter program as we know it will be dead on arrival. We do not need a helicopter. We had a perfectly good memo of understanding agreement with Spokane County, which is only another 20 minutes to the west, where we got to use their helicopter for search and rescue and for investigating suspects. The reason why we have a helicopter right now is it's kingdom building by Bob Norris and Mark Ellis, Lieutenant Mark Ellis. We're not going to get into it tonight as far as the Kootenai County Regional Air Support Unit, how that came to be. But in essence, the helicopter, as we currently understand it, and as approved by the county commissioners, is supposed to be 100% donated at no cost to be used by the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office by generous donors in the community. So we don't know currently what the cost of those operations are. Now, a friend of mine, former undersheriff of Spokane County 20 plus years ago, brought the original air support unit into Spokane County, and he is an expert on policies and procedures. And I've run many things by through him. I've also put in a records request into Spokane County requesting their actual versus budgeted cost per year to run their helicopter. I have not received that yet, and I am waiting, but my friend is informing me that it runs about $1,500 per hour to fly those helicopters. And that doesn't even account to the overall maintenance. Helicopters require a lot of annual maintenance based on hours operated. So I'm being told that a helicopter program can run on average to 1.5 million, from 1.5 million to over $4 million per year. Now, currently, allegedly, we're not paying for that. The only thing that we're paying for, besides $100,000 of civil asset forfeiture money we use to equip this helicopter, which we don't own, we only have to pay for our own personnel that's on the helicopter. So, and remember, this helicopter was never supposed to be used for surveillance of the people or traffic infractions. In other words, making certain that people are obeying traffic laws. And we know that it has been used recently for just that. And that was surveilling some motorcyclists, but also Bob Norris loaned the helicopter and the use to the FBI back in March of 2020 for about 3 hours, where they're surveilling some individuals down in Clearwater County, which is 2 counties to the south near Orofino, Idaho. So, the helicopter program is not needed. We have drones. The current helicopter that we're using doesn't even have hoist capability. So search and rescue has to take somebody out. You can't use the helicopter to evacuate them with a cable and harness. The Two Bear Air that originally was offering its services free of charge from Kalispell, Montana, does have hoist capabilities. And Shoshone County, just to the east, recently had to employ them because they had 2 ATV riders that were injured in an accident. And the only way that they could get them out was through the helicopter. And they also use MedStar as well as Spokane County Back County Patrol, which is equivalent to Kootenai County Search and Rescue. So I'm kind of curious as to why Shoshone went all the way to Washington State, 2 counties to the west, to use services from the Spokane County Sheriff's Office versus going to Kootenai County, which we were told all the outlying agencies wanted to use.
So what happens in Kootenai County if they have a search and rescue incident where hoist capabilities are exactly what's needed for that mission? Is there still an agreement with the other counties or organizations that have a helicopter that does that?
Well, we don't know about Two Bear Air, but what we know is that they suspended the memo of understanding with Spokane County.
Right. So if you have a one-off, how does that?
We don't know logistically. Now,
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, there was a woman out on the east part of the county that went missing. She was out fishing with her family. Family didn't hear from her for, I think, 20 minutes, went to go looking for her, couldn't find her, immediately contacted Kootenai County. Kootenai County deployed resources, but they suspended the search after 15 hours. And according to Zach Sifford, Lieutenant Sifford, who is the public information officer, much to the dismay of the family members of this missing woman, said, hey, there's not much we can do. We've put drones up, which, by the way, drones is a great option instead of a helicopter, especially when you don't have hoist capabilities. But they suspended the search after 15 hours, citing, well, they weren't even certain that she didn't get into a vehicle off of I-90 and hitchhike somewhere. Now, I'm going to tell you, as sheriff of Kootenai County, if I had a lieutenant or a captain come up to me and say, hey, we're going to suspend this search after 15 hours because this elderly woman may or may not have gotten into a vehicle off of I-90, my first question would have been, did anybody call and report picking up an elderly woman in a remote area of the county asking for a ride into town with no obvious broken down vehicle? Common sense, right? I mean, give me a break. I don't have all the facts, so I'm shooting from the hip. But praise God, a couple days later, this woman was found alive, and I'm happy for her family. But hey, we're told that we have all these shiny toys for search and rescue and for securing the county, but I think it's more or less a play toy for Bob Norris to make him look cool to all of his big donors when he flies into Black Rock and he does these exhibitions at overtime rates with his deputies, with his canines, with his SWAT. And by the way, you guys didn't know about that, did you? And we could talk about that probably at a later date. We'll show you some videos that you might find amusing. But yeah, remember, the helicopter is not needed. In fact, they just got another grant, a $30,000 grant for another drone. So there's no reason that we can't be using drones in place of the helicopter for many instances. But I would immediately enter back into a cheap relationship with Spokane County that has more than one helicopter, more than one asset. $10,000 a year is pretty minimal.
Yes, and it's an item that can be budgeted. It can be budgeted. It's a known quantity.
Yeah.
Whereas the situation we're in now, it really is not. Earlier, you were mentioning civil asset forfeiture money.
Yeah.
Briefly tell us what that is, because I think it's easy to forget. Like, look, I'm not in law enforcement. I don't speak the lingo.
Yeah.
So what is it briefly? Are you in favor of it?
My belief is it's ultimately a violation of Fourth Amendment that was unfortunately sold to the American people during the war on drugs. It was a way of supposedly punishing people running drugs into the country. So if you were, caught in the commission of committing a crime, transporting drugs and or manufacturing, then what happened is law enforcement would seize your property, and then prior to your trial, they would liquidate your assets, whether they're vehicles, whether it's property. Federal government gets the largest chunk of that, and then local municipalities get to divvy up the rest of that for their own budget use.
So
it's a violation
prior to your
to
trial.
being convicted. Prior to being convicted. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but I must for this conversation. I am absolutely 100% against civil asset forfeiture money. In this country, we are all afforded, whether or not we're dirtbags or not, due process. And it's important that a jury of your peers finds you guilty, and in which case you must answer for the crimes that you've been convicted of, whatever that cost may be, incarceration, monetary loss. And I'm okay upon conviction of somebody manufacturing or running drugs to lose their assets, but not before. And I don't think there is any good argument that would truly hold up to the intent of the founders, specifically with the Fourth Amendment, that would truly agree with what we've been doing for the past 30, 40 years. So that's about all I have for tonight. I appreciate everybody hanging with us on a non-typical live event. We didn't want the week to go by without connecting with the people. We get questions all week long via email, instant messages, even in public. But for those of you that can't get out, that maybe don't want to send an email, this is a great opportunity every week, typically on Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, where we have an hour of conversations where I get to inform you of whatever the latest things that I'm uncovering in Kootenai County that needs to be recognized, or I get to answer your great questions. Remember, the sheriff is a representative of the people, and it's important that your sheriff truly has your best interests at heart and has fidelity to the Constitution and to the Bill of Rights specifically, because he is that individual that can be the interposition between an out of control, unaccountable federal and state, and let's also add local government, and the people. There is separation of powers, folks, not only between the three branches, but the founders wanted there to be separation between the federal government and the state government, and the sheriff operates as the executive branch under the state, parallel governments, if you will. So remember, the federal government doesn't have any more sovereignty or power than we do right here locally. And we got a lot of tough times on the horizon. We've seen some things going on. This J6 decision that was made today, where it overturned previous charges, and in some case, convictions and or plea deals by people that were erroneously charged with obstructing the official business of Congress. 350 individuals, and I don't know how many prior to that had to took a plea deal. The Supreme Court said, yeah, that's not the true definition. And you've charged these people erroneously. And the FBI has tirelessly gone after J6 folks. We're not talking about those that were involved with rioting, assaulting, destroying property. We're talking about grandmas, pastors, community leaders that were there exercising their God-given protected right to petition their government. And they were set up by a bunch of agitators that were sent there most likely by the FBI to agitate the crowd, to give the wrong optics. They used these poor people and have been relentlessly going after them and persecuting them and prosecuting them, suspending in many instances their due process. Meanwhile, they don't bother to use the same laws that they're charging these J6ers with that was overturned today for those that were part of BLM, Antifa, that did act out acts of violence on the Capitol. 2 tiers of justice. We have seen the Department of Justice and the FBI weaponized against political opposition. And it is time for men of liberty all over this country, especially those of you that are elected in your positions, to stand up to tyranny and say, we will no longer participate in this game. You're not playing by the rules that we originally all agreed upon. So until you change your behavior, you can expect out of us the exact same response towards you, which is lawfare, which is tying things up in court, because we will win. We will take this country back and make certain that everyone enjoys equal protection under the law. And I'm looking forward to being your next sheriff. I'm looking forward to protecting the people and engaging this community for the tough times that are ahead. We don't have to despair. We have much to be encouraged about. I want you to be encouraged. We didn't descend from fearful men, but we descend from men that understood the times. They acted accordingly. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And now, in our generation, it's up to us to do the same thing. Be strong and of good courage. Go to theidahosheriff.com. Go to my social media pages, The Idaho Sheriff. If you can contribute to my campaign financially, please do so. We have magnets for anybody that spends over $25 locally. We'll get those to you. We have t-shirts. We have a merch store. We're going to be at the Coeur d'Alene 4th of July parade coming up very shortly this next week. If you want to join us, come sign up. info@theidahosheriff.com. For the first 30 that are coming, we have t-shirts for you. Look, we've got a lot of events coming up in this community. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you. I will see many of you tomorrow, the Trump Boat Patriot Parade in Coeur d'Alene and Spokane River. God bless you all. God bless Kootenai County, and may God bless the United States. See y'all.